Welcome to the deep dive. And well, today's a really big day. We're not just talking about history today, we are literally watching it unfold.
That's absolutely right, because today, November 1st, 2025, it's finally happened. The Grand Egyptian Museum, the GM in Giza, is officially opening its doors.
It feels momentous, doesn't it, after all this time?
Genuinely monumental.
Yeah.
Okay, think about it. This project has been in the works for over 3 decades.
30 years. Wow.
Yeah, it cost $1 billion, survived, revolutions, a global pandemic, just to get to this point, to today.
And our sources, they really detail this incredible journey, don't they? But our focus today, our deep dive, it's more than just listing dates, right?
Exactly. It's about understanding the why behind it all.
Yeah.
The sheer scale. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. Over 100,000 artifacts in the collection. And the physical size, 500,000 square meters.
500,000. It makes it the largest museum in the world dedicated entirely to just one single civilization.
And its location is just perfect, only 2 kilometers from the Giza Pyramid complex itself.
And that proximity isn't accidental. What's fascinating, I think, is the whole curatorial idea behind bringing everything together like this.
Right, because for so long, our understanding of ancient Egypt felt, well, fragmented.
Completely. You had pieces scattered everywhere. The old museum in Cairo, obviously, but also Luxor, Alexandria, even museums abroad.
And often displayed based on what looks, rather than telling a coherent story.
Pretty much. Aesthetic appeal often trumped historical flow. So the GM aims to change that narrative fundamentally.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack this colossal undertaking. We're talking the 33-year journey.
The architecture, too, how the modern building actually speaks to the ancient pyramids next door.
And crucially, the collection itself, how having everything together, especially presented chronologically for the first time, how that's going to shift how we all understand Egyptian history.
It's moving from seeing fragments to seeing the whole picture, a kind of synthesis.
I like that.
Yeah, that transformation is really the core idea. The location, the way it's organized by time, and having, for instance, the entire Tutankhamun collection together, it all works to tell a story that just hasn't been told this way before.
Okay. But before we mentally step inside those opening doors today, we really need to appreciate the journey, that long, often difficult road that led us right here to November 1st, 2025.
Absolutely. It wasn't straightforward at all.
All right, let's dive into that long road. It starts way back, doesn't it? The 1990s.
It does. And it wasn't just about needing more space, although the old museum was certainly overcrowded.
No, it was more fundamental than that.
Very much so. The idea really came from this deep dissatisfaction with how Egypt's heritage was being presented.
Ah, okay. The old Egyptian museum in Tahrir Square. I mean, it's iconic, but maybe not ideal for modern standards.
Exactly. And the person who really pushed for the GM initially, the former Minister of Culture, Farouk Hosni, he wasn't shy about saying so.
What did he say?
He was incredibly blunt.
Yeah.
Called the old museum old-fashioned, disorganized. He even said visiting it gave him headaches and depression.
Wow, that's quite a critique.
It was. It wasn't just, an administrative complaint. It was emotional. He felt Egypt's legacy deserved something better, something up to modern preservation and display standards.
You can see the point. A kind of national pride demanding a space on par with, say, the Louvre, but focused entirely on their own story.
Precisely. So the idea gains traction in the 90s. President Hosni Mubarak officially launches the project in 1992.
92, okay. But then there's a gap. The foundation stone isn't laid until 2002.
Right, and actual construction, boots on the ground, that didn't really start properly until 2005.
So even from the very beginning, there were delays built in. It signals the complexity, I guess.
Really does. And you have to remember the scale. This commitment stretched over decades, and the cost, $1 billion by the time it was finally completed in 2023.
$1 billion? Where did that funding come from? It's massive.
It's staggering. It was a mix, really. Egyptian government funding, of course, but also significant loans, particularly from Japan, and various external donations, too.
When you see that number, $1 billion, you have to wonder about the return. This isn't just building a museum, it's a huge statement.
It's absolutely a statement. Egypt aiming to set a new global standard for this kind of museum.
And they expect it to pay off, tourism-wise.
That's the projection. The sources suggest the anticipated tourism revenue linked directly to the GM could potentially justify that cost within about a decade.
Assuming things stay stable in the region, of course.
That's the big caveat, always. But yes, it's Egypt's big play to really dominate the ancient history tourism market.
And the actual construction, or who handled that?
It was a joint venture. You had the Belgian BD6 group, who have a lot of experience with large, complex projects,
Okay.
partnered with the major Egyptian company, Orscom Construction. They had to handle everything from, huge earth-moving operations initially to the incredibly delicate logistics of moving giant ancient artifacts later on.
Which leads us nicely into the, let's call it the era of postponements. Because the original plan was for a 2020 opening, wasn't it?
It was. Feels like a different world now looking back.
Doesn't it just, what happened with 2020? Obviously the pandemic.
Yeah, COVID-19 basically threw a huge wrench in the works almost immediately. International logistics just froze. Getting specialized installation crews in, preparing the artifacts, everything stopped.
So that pushed it to 2021.
It did. But even when the pandemic started to ease up a bit, the sheer scale of the task,
Yeah.
just handling all those artifacts,
Yeah.
finishing the highly specialized internal stuff like the conservation labs, it just took longer.
So more delays.
Yeah.
Late 2022, then early 2023 became the targets.
Exactly. It's one thing to build the shell. It's another to get, 5,000 delicate objects from Tutankhamun's tomb alone ready and installed perfectly, let alone the other tens of thousands.
It's mind-boggling logistics. But the museum wasn't just sitting there empty during these final years, was it? They had that trial phase.
Yes, and that was absolutely critical, not just for bringing in some early revenue, but for testing everything.
Like a dress rehearsal.
A massive one. It started back in October 2024. They called it a trial period, basically a soft opening. They let in up to 4,000 visitors a day.
4,000 a day. That's significant.
It is. And over the 10 months leading up to the final closure, before today's grand opening, they had about 1.5 million visitors come through.
Wow. So that allowed them to really fine-tune everything. Security, climate control, how people move through the space, ticketing.
Exactly. All the operational systems got a real-world stress test before the massive global spotlight hit them today.
Smart. But even after that successful trial, there was one more delay. Earlier this year, right? The planned July 3rd opening got scrapped.
Yes, that was the final hurdle. And this one was purely geopolitical.
The conflict between Iran and Israel.
That was the stated reason, yes. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli announced the postponement, citing the ongoing military conflict and the expected regional instability.
So security concerns, basically, for a big international opening event.
That seems to have been the primary driver, according to the sources, ensuring the safety of visiting dignitaries, heads of state, and also, frankly, protecting Egypt's vital tourism sector from any potential disruption during a sensitive time. It was a high-stakes call.
Understandable, I suppose. So that decision was made, and then they finally landed on today, November 1st.
Yes, the final confirmation came from President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on August 6th this year. He agreed on November 1st, locking it in.
And that led to the temporary closure we just saw.
Right. To manage the shift from the trial operations to today's massive official ceremony, the whole complex shut down temporarily from October 15th until November 3rd, just for final checks, media setups, installing high security measures for the event itself.
So today, November 1st, 2025, is the official grand opening ceremony. But when do regular visitors get back in?
There's a nice bit of symbolism there. The museum reopens its doors to the public on November 4th.
November 4th. Why that date?
It's the 103rd anniversary of Howard Carter's discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun.
Ah, brilliant. Tying the museum's public opening directly to its most famous resident, so to speak.
Exactly. It's a deliberate signal that the newly unified collection of the Boy King is really the spiritual heart of this whole massive new institution.
Okay, so we've covered the decades it took to reach today. Let's talk about the building itself. You mentioned its design connects to the Giza landscape. How does it actually do that? How does this modern structure talk to the pyramids?
Well, that dialogue, that conversation between the new museum and the ancient pyramids, that was really the core challenge for the architects.
And they chose the architects through a competition.
A huge one. Announced back in 2002, it attracted, get this, 1,557 entries.
1,557. Seriously.
From 82 different countries. Our sources say it was the second largest architectural competition in history. Just shows you the prestige and, frankly, the difficulty of the project.
Incredible. And the winners were an Irish firm.
That's right. Rosen Hennigan and Shifu Peng of Hennigan Peng Architects, based in Ireland. And their winning concept wasn't about competing with the pyramids, which you could never do.
No, you'd lose that battle.
Right. Instead, their idea was to frame them, to create a structure that acknowledges and respects the ancient monuments.
How do they achieve that architecturally?
The building itself has this distinctive shape, like a chamfered triangle. But the real genius is in the alignment.
The alignment.
Yes. The museum's north and south walls aren't just randomly placed. They are precisely positioned to line up directly with the Great Pyramid of Khufu and the Pyramid of Menkaure.
So, from certain viewpoints, the museum walls literally point to the pyramids.
Exactly. It creates this powerful visual and geographical connection. It physically ties this 21st century building into that 4,500-year-old sacred landscape. It's incredibly thoughtful.
That is profound. A visual dialogue across millennia. What about the materials? What does it look like up close?
They wanted materials that felt both permanent and somehow luminous. So you see a lot of marble and a lot of glass.
And the facade is quite special, I hear.
Very. It's decorated with thousands of cartouches and hieroglyphs, the names of ancient kings and queens. So it carries that textual link to the past right on its skin.
Like the building itself is inscribed with history.
And a key feature is the use of translucent alabaster stone for the main facade. Imagine that under the Egyptian sun, it must give the building this incredible glow, almost ethereal.
Wow. And that luminous exterior leads you into the main entrance, the grand hall or atrium?
Correct. That's where your experience inside begins.
Mm-hmm.
And it's vast, 10,000 square meters.
10,000 square meters just for the entrance hall.
Just the entrance. And the key design feature here is transparency. It has this huge glass roof and a massive transparent facade specifically designed so that even when you're inside the museum, the Giza pyramids are still visible.
So you never lose sight of them. They're always present.
That's the deliberate intent. They act as these silent, colossal anchors to the whole experience. You're constantly reminded of the history just outside the window.
And as you step into that vast space, you're immediately met by, well, a giant.
You certainly are. The centerpiece, the main introductory artifact in the atrium, is that absolutely colossal statue of Pharaoh Ramesses II.
How big are we talking?
It stands 11 meters tall, that's over 36 feet, and weighs 83 tons.
83 tons. How did they even move that?
Very, very carefully. It was a huge undertaking in itself, moving it from its previous location. But it serves as this immediate, powerful symbol of pharaonic authority right as you walk in.
Kind of sets the tone. Is it alone there?
No, it's the anchor, but it's accompanied by maybe 20 or 30 other large artifacts. They're carefully chosen to give you a taste of the breadth of the collection and the historical periods the museum covers.
A powerful introduction. And from there, your eye is drawn upwards, right, to the grand staircase.
Yes. And this staircase, it's not just a way to get between floors. It's absolutely central to the whole visitor journey.
More than just stairs, then.
Much more. Think of it as a transitional gallery in its own right. It covers 6,000 square meters and rises 6 stories high, about 50 meters, or 160 feet.
6 stories high. Wow.
And the whole idea is that as you ascend, you are literally walking up through pharaonic history before you even reach the main exhibition halls.
Okay, how does that work? You mentioned it displays artifacts, over 60 of them?
That's right. And they're not just placed randomly. They're arranged into 4 distinct chronological and thematic sections. That's like 4 mini exhibits on the way up.
Interesting. What's the first section about?
Section 1 is called the royal image. It focuses entirely on how the pharaohs presented themselves. You see royal statues, reliefs. It's all about understanding their crafted image, their power, their propaganda, if you like.
How they want it to be seen. Makes sense. What comes after the royal image?
That naturally leads into the religious context.
Yeah.
So section 2 is divine houses. This looks at temples and explores the really complex relationship between the gods and the pharaohs. How did they interact? What was the role of the temple? You see religious art here.
Okay, royal power, then the divine connection. What's third?
The third section broadens that out. It's called Gods and Kings. This delves deeper into the ancient Egyptian pantheon itself. You learn about specific gods, their roles, and how different rulers associated themselves with particular deities throughout history. He gives you the theological backstory.
Right, setting you up for what you'll see in the main halls. So you've climbed through power, religion, theology. Where does the staircase leave you?
It culminates in the 4th and final section, right before you enter the main galleries, the funerary section.
Focusing on the afterlife.
Exactly. It's a powerful introduction to those themes. You see large stone coffins, incredibly detailed sarcophagi, and significantly something called a Hermione.
A Hermione, what's that?
It's the technical term for the capstone of a pyramid, the very top piece. This one dates from the 13th dynasty.
Why display a pyramid capstone there, right at the top of the stairs?
Think about what it represents. The pyramidion, or Hermione, is the point connecting the tomb, the earth, and the heavens. It symbolizes the king's ascent and immortality. Placing it there, just before you enter halls filled with tomb treasures, powerfully reminds you that everything from Tutankhamun's gold to everyday objects is tied into this profound Egyptian belief in the afterlife.
It grounds the whole experience in that core belief. Very clever. Are there any other standout pieces on the staircase?
Yes, one really notable example is the striking head of King Akhenaten from that controversial Amarna period around 1350 BCE. Seeing that powerful, stylized face there just underscores the quality and scale of artifacts they're using even in this transitional space.
Okay, that staircase sounds like an experience in itself. It's successfully primed us for the main event, and there's really no question what the absolute star attraction, the gravitational center of the whole GM is going to be, is there.
Not at all. It has to be the complete, unified collection of Tutankhamun.
Complete. That's the key word here, isn't it?
It's the defining feature. For the very first time anywhere in the world, the public can see every single piece recovered from Tutankhamun's tomb, all 5,398 of them together.
5,398 artifacts. That just changes everything, doesn't it? Seeing it all in one place.
Fundamentally, before, we saw highlights. Maybe the mask here, some furniture there. Now you see the entire context, the full picture of what a pharaoh needed or thought he needed for the afterlife.
That sheer number must take up a huge amount of space.
It does. The Tutankhamun collection occupies 2 of the 12 main exhibition halls. That's 7,000 square meters dedicated just to him.
7,000 square meters.
And the way it's displayed isn't just like a treasure chest dumped open. The curators designed the halls to try and evoke the feeling of the original tomb, KV62, in the Valley of the Kings.
How do they do that? And how do they protect such fragile items?
Well, visually, through the layout and lighting. But technically, it relies on incredibly sophisticated environmental controls. We're talking precise temperature and humidity management, constantly monitored. It's absolutely vital for preserving the really sensitive materials, things like ancient wood, fabrics, textiles, and of course the gold leaf itself, which is incredibly fragile.
Right. So let's talk about some of those treasures. Obviously, the mask.
The golden mask, yes. It's the icon, the centerpiece, no question. But seeing it now, surrounded by everything else, it gains even more power.
Like what else? The coffins.
Exactly. You can see the nest of 3 coffins, one inside the other, and the innermost one. Well, it's made of solid gold.
Solid gold. How heavy is that?
It weighs 110 kilograms.
110 kilos. It's what, nearly 250 pounds of pure gold?
Incredible craftsmanship, incredible wealth. But it's not just about the gold. There are pieces that tell such human stories.
Like the throne.
The golden throne, yes. It's covered in gold and silver leaf, precious stones. But the scene depicted on the back is what's really captivating. It shows Tutankhamun and his wife, Ankhesenamun, in this really intimate, almost casual pose.
Ah, that famous image. It's quite different from the usual formal pharaoh portraits.
Completely. It gives you this rare glimpse of, well, tenderness, domesticity, a personal moment amidst all the state regalia. Seeing the whole collection allows you to see him not just as a symbol, but perhaps a bit more as a person.
So you get the full spectrum from immense wealth and power to these more personal touches.
Precisely. And you see the functional items, too. His daily tools, his weapons, daggers, bows and arrows, furniture beds, chairs, boxes, even things like dining utensils, the mundane alongside the magnificent.
And then there are all the religious items, right? Statues, amulets.
Thousands of them. You see statues of gods, like the famous Anubis shrine. You see amulets for protection, intricate jewelry, and of course the Ushabti figurines.
Right, you mentioned those. Remind us what exactly Ushabtis were for.
Okay, so Ushabti basically means answerer. They were small figurines, often mummy-shaped, placed in the tomb in huge numbers.
Hundreds in Tut's too, right?
Hundreds. And the belief was, in the afterlife, if the gods called upon the deceased king to do any kind of manual labor like farming Osiris's fields or digging canals.
Which the king probably didn't fancy doing.
Exactly. The idea was these Ushabti figurines would magically come to life and say, "Here I am," and do the work for him. They were essentially his afterlife servants, his magical workforce.
An ancient insurance policy against hard work in eternity. Brilliant.
Pretty much. Seeing all of them together really drives home the Egyptians' detailed planning for the afterlife.
It really paints a complete picture of his world daily life. Royalty, war, religion, afterlife. But we should be clear, the king himself isn't here, is he?
That's a crucial point. No. While every single artifact from his tomb, KV62, has been moved and is now displayed here at the GM in Giza,
Tutankhamun's mummy.
his actual mummy remains in the Valley of the Kings, in Luxor. It's still resting within KV-62. That decision was made out of respect for the original context and also for the mummy's long-term preservation and stability.
Understood. Okay, moving from the New Kingdom back to the Old Kingdom, the GM is also home to another massive piece of history, Khufu's ships.
Yes, the solar boats of King Khufu, the pharaoh who built the Great Pyramid. These are incredibly important.
They have their own dedicated space.
They do. There's a separate but connected Khufu Ships Museum built specifically to house these two vessels. And these are just ancient, around 4,600 years old, some of the oldest intact wooden ships ever found anywhere.
4,600 years. The challenge of preserving and moving something like that must have been immense.
Herculean is probably the right word. The first ship, found back in 1954, was housed in a somewhat basic museum right next to the pyramid for decades.
I remember that old building.
Moving that ship, which weighs about 20 tons and is incredibly fragile across the Giza Plateau to the new GM facility in August 2021. It was a massive, high-tech, incredibly delicate operation.
I bet, and now they're in a proper climate-controlled environment.
Exactly. The new museum explains their story, uses interactive displays to talk about their possible purpose. Were they funerary barges to carry the king's body? Or symbolic boats for his journey with the sun god Ra in the afterlife? We still debate it, but now they're preserved for the future.
Fantastic. And finally, while Tutankhamun and Khufu get the big headlines, we need to remember the sheer scale of the rest of the collection.
Absolutely. We keep saying over 100,000 artifacts, and they span the entire range of ancient Egyptian history, from the pre-dynastic period before the pharaohs right through to Coptic Egypt in the early centuries CE.
And a lot of this hasn't been seen before.
That's a key point from the sources. At least 20,000 artifacts on display in the GEM are being shown to the public for the very first time.
20,000 debut pieces. Where did they come from?
Many were in storage facilities for decades. Others have undergone long-term, painstaking restoration. This includes important collections like the funerary goods of Queen Hedefires.
Khufu's mother.
That's her. And also the collection belonging to Yuya and Tuyu.
Who were they again?
They were powerful nobles, the parents of Queen Tai, who was the influential wife of Amenhotep III. Their tomb was remarkably intact when found. So the GM isn't just relocating known items, it's genuinely unveiling newly accessible history on a massive scale.
Okay, so the collection is unprecedented, the building is spectacular, but the real promise, the thing that might fundamentally shift understanding, is how it's all organized, right?
Yeah.
That chronological flow through the 12 main halls.
This is where the synthesis happens. This is the core curatorial strategy that sets the GM apart. Those 12 main halls, which take up about a third of the whole site, by the way, are laid out in a strict time sequence.
Strict sequence. Starting when and ending when?
Starting way back, around 3100 BCE, with the unification of Egypt and the beginning of the dynastic period. And it runs all the way through to about 400 CE, covering the Roman period in Egypt.
So you literally walk through 3,500 years of history.
That's the idea.
Yep.
It provides this narrative thread, this understanding of development, change, continuity, and eventually transformation that was often missing in older museum layouts where things might be grouped by material or theme, but not necessarily time.
That makes so much sense. Can you give us a quick breakdown of how the eras map onto the halls?
Sure. The journey starts logically with the formation of the state. Halls 1, 2, and 3 cover the very beginnings. Prehistoric finds, the pre-dynastic cultures, the early dynastic period when kingship solidified, then the Old Kingdom, the age of the great pyramid builders, and finally the first intermediate period when central authority collapsed for a time.
So the origins and the first peak, what comes next?
Halls 4, 5, and 6 move into the Middle Kingdom. This is a period of reunification, often seen as a classical age for literature and art, followed by the second intermediate period, another time of division and foreign influence, notably the Hyksos.
Okay, so rise, fall, Renaissance, fall again, leads us to the Imperial Age.
Exactly. Halls 7, 8, and 9 are dedicated entirely to the New Kingdom. This is Egypt at its imperial height. The great warrior pharaohs like Thutmose III, Ramesses II, the expansion of the empire, incredible temple building at Karnak and Luxor, and of course, this is the era of Tutankhamun.
So his treasures in halls X and Y presumably sit right within their proper historical context provided by halls 7, 8, 9.
Precisely. You understand the world he was born into before you see his specific burial goods. It provides immediate context.
Perfect. And the final stretch.
Halls 10, 11, and 12 cover the final chapters of native Egyptian rule and the subsequent periods. You get the third intermediate period, the late period, with Persian and Nubian influence, and then the Ptolemaic, Greek, and Roman periods. It shows how ancient Egypt gradually transformed and integrated into the wider Hellenistic and Roman worlds.
A complete story, cradle to, well, transformation. And pulling all that together required gathering artifacts from all over Egypt.
All over. Items were meticulously selected and relocated not just from the old Cairo Museum and its storerooms, but from sites and museums in Luxor, Minya, Sohag, Alexandria, even remote storage facilities. It was a nationwide logistical puzzle lasting years.
And moving these incredibly old, often fragile, sometimes enormous pieces that requires serious conservation expertise. Which brings us to the Gemen's Conservation Center.
Yes, and this facility is arguably just as important as the display halls for the long-term legacy. It's the engine room keeping the history alive.
It was built quite early on, wasn't it?
It was one of the first parts of the project to get going. Established in 2006, fully operational by 2010. And it's world-class, recognized as one of the largest and best-equipped conservation centers anywhere, and certainly the biggest dedicated to antiquities in the entire Middle East.
What makes it so special? What's inside?
Well, first, its scale and location. It's situated just west of the main museum building, conveniently connected by a 200-meter underground tunnel.
For safely moving artifacts back and forth?
Exactly. And inside, it houses 19 highly specialized laboratories. Think about the different materials they have to deal with.
Right, you've got stone, wood, metal, pottery, textiles.
Papyrus, mummies, wall paintings. Each needs its own specific environment, tools, and expertise. So there are dedicated labs for all of these. Plus, they have 6 large environmentally controlled storage rooms for artifacts that aren't currently on display or are awaiting research.
So the GM isn't just showing history, it's actively preserving and studying it on a massive scale. It's a living institution.
Absolutely. That's fundamental to its mission. But the planning also looked forward, thinking about how to engage people, especially younger generations.
It's a children's museum.
Yes. It's a significant space, 5,000 square meters, designed specifically for kids aged roughly 6 to 12. And the philosophy is totally different from a traditional museum.
How so? Less look but don't touch.
Much less. The emphasis is all on interactive learning. They use things like virtual reality, hands-on games, replicas, activities designed to let kids engage directly and make discoveries for themselves. It opened partially back in August 2024, testing the waters.
That sounds fantastic. A way to spark that initial curiosity and maybe inspire future Egyptologists.
That's definitely the hope. And it's not just kids. The GM is built to engage the global academic community, too, with its conference center.
Right, you mentioned that. It's pretty big.
Huge, 40,000 square meters, designed from the ground up to be a major international hub for conferences, symposia, lectures related to Egyptology and museology.
What kind of facilities does it have?
Top-tier stuff. There's a main auditorium that seats 1,000 people, 3 smaller seminar halls, each holding 250, and even a 250-seat 3D theater, presumably for immersive historical presentations.
And the design reflects the museum's theme.
Yes, even the conference center's architecture subtly echoes ancient pharaonic sites. The use of stone, the scale, the geometric motifs, it maintains that aesthetic link.
Smart. They also plan for temporary shows, right, to keep things fresh.
Absolutely essential for a modern museum. There are 4 dedicated temporary exhibition halls, adding up to 5,000 square meters of space.
And that's part of a larger area for non-permanent displays.
Yes. In total, the sources mentioned 32,000 square meters of space across the museum designated for non-permanent or rotating exhibitions. That allows them to host major international shows, showcase recent discoveries, or explore specific themes in more detail. Keeps people coming back.
This whole massive operation needs top-level management, I assume.
Of course. The overall strategic direction comes from a board of trustees. It's a 16-member board appointed directly by the President of Egypt, serving 3-year terms. They oversee the policy, the finances, the international partnerships, ensuring it functions as a major national cultural asset.
And the museum has already started functioning as a cultural venue even before today's official opening.
It has, testing its capabilities. A notable example was back in January 2023, they held the first musical concert inside the museum complex.
Oh, really? Who performed?
The acclaimed Egyptian soprano, Fatma said. It was a clear signal that the GM intends to be more than just a place for artifacts. It aims to be a living, breathing center for culture and the arts in modern Egypt. #outro.
Well, it's quite overwhelming when you pull it all together. Today, November 1st, 2025, it really marks the culmination of an epic journey.
Absolutely. Decades of planning, dreaming, overcoming huge obstacles. From that initial critique back in the 90s about the old museum being, depressing,
Right, through revolutions, funding challenges, pandemics, geopolitical delays.
to finally arrive here at the opening of this incredible place. It truly is a meeting point of deep history, stunning modern architecture, and cutting-edge conservation science.
And its core promise, really, is to redefine how we experience ancient Egypt, to give us that comprehensive chronological view, finally.
Exactly, especially with the Tutankhamun collection, completely reunited after 103 years, sitting right in the middle of that historical narrative told across the 12 halls. It forces a shift, doesn't it, away from just gawking at gold.
Towards understanding the context, the flow, the sheer continuity of this amazing 3,000-year civilization.
That power of synthesis, seeing the whole story laid out, rather than just disconnected highlights, that feels like the GM's biggest potential contribution.
It really does. And thinking about that synthesis, especially as the doors prepare to open to the public in just a few days on that poignant anniversary, let's leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay, consider this. For generations, anyone wanting to understand Egyptian history in depth had to mentally stitch it together. You'd see Old Kingdom pieces here, New Kingdom there, maybe late period items in a different museum altogether, or even a different country.
It was fragmented knowledge. You had to do the connecting yourself.
But now at the GM, you walk up that grand staircase, getting that thematic and chronological primer. Then you physically walk through halls 1 to 12, moving seamlessly from 3100 BCE to 400 CE.
And Tutankhamun isn't isolated. You encounter his world after understanding the New Kingdom context in the preceding halls and before seeing the periods that followed. It's all integrated.
So here's the question to think about. With this unprecedented chronological arrangement, and with the complete Tutankhamun collection presented as a unified whole for the very first time, how will this fundamentally change global understanding?
Well, seeing the story laid out so clearly, so sequentially, the origins, the peaks, the transitions, the decline and transformation finally allow for a more unified, less fragmented appreciation.
Could this lead to genuinely new insights into the complexity, the resilience, the sheer continuity of ancient Egyptian civilization, simply because it's being presented holistically for the first time on this scale?
It's a fascinating question. The impact this museum, opening today, might have on our collective understanding for generations to come. Something for all of us to watch.
Indeed. The next chapter in understanding ancient Egypt arguably begins right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. For the last 10 years, if you were following global science funding even slightly, you couldn't miss the Human Brain Project, the HBP. And this wasn't just, another research grant. This thing was huge. A proper scientific moonshot, really. One of the most ambitious civilian science projects we've seen in a long time.
Oh, absolutely. You're talking about a massive commitment. It was a $1 billion, 10-year initiative launched by the European Union, ran from October 2013 right through to September 2023.
10 full years.
10 years. Coordinated by EPFL, that's the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in Geneva. And the core idea, the really breathtaking mission, was using modern supercomputing to try and, fundamentally change how we understand the brain.
€1 billion. And it wasn't just for salaries and lab equipment, was it? The focus was on building infrastructure.
Exactly. That was the key deliverable in many ways.
And we need to be clear for you listening, when we say infrastructure for this, we're talking about some serious computing power. This wasn't like, oh, let's build a slightly faster computer.
No, not at all.
They were aiming for exascale computing from the get-go, which means building machines that can crunch, over a quintillion calculations per second? A billion. Just mind-boggling numbers.
That scale really tells you something about the sheer scale of the challenge they set themselves. So our deep dive today is really about dissecting that decade. We want to understand their core strategy.
Right.
Look closely at the 6, frankly, incredible technology platforms they managed to build. Touch on why they ran into some pretty major internal controversy, and figure out what legacy is actually left now that the HBP has officially wrapped up.
Okay, so the problem is modeling the human brain. People say it's the most complex object in the known universe.
Right.
Where do you even begin with something like that? What was the HBP's blueprint?
Well, they knew they couldn't just simulate the whole thing at once, that was clear. But they also knew you couldn't just ignore parts of it either. So the core strategy was essentially to investigate the brain across vastly different scales all at the same time.
Different scales,
Yeah.
meaning like,
Meaning everything from the tiny molecular level individual proteins, synapses, right up to the huge networks of neurons that underpin, higher cognitive functions, thinking, deciding, learning. And across time, too, from milliseconds up to years of development or aging.
okay, but how do you stop that just becoming 100 different research projects going in 100 different directions? That sounds like chaos.
Right, that's where the integration piece comes in.
Huh.
And the structure, they set up this constant collaborative loop. It was designed to work like this. You take experimental data, real measurements from labs,
Mm-hmm.
use that data to develop theoretical models of how things might work. Then you run those models as simulations on the supercomputers.
Okay.
Those simulations generate predictions. If our model is right, then X should happen. And then crucially, you go back to the lab and test those predictions empirically with new experiments.
So it's a feedback loop. Data, model, simulate, predict, test, get new data.
Exactly. A closed feedback loop designed to constantly refine the digital models, making them more accurate representations of the actual biology.
And the goal wasn't just the insights from that loop, was it? It was about making the loop itself, the machinery, available to everyone.
Precisely. That's a really key point. The central objective was to create a permanent ICT-based research infrastructure, something accessible to researchers all over the world. You can almost think of the HBP's job as building the shared library, the massive processing power, and maybe even the standardized language that neuroscience really needed to move forward collectively.
To give you a sense of just how big this construction project was, the HBP was split into 12 sub-projects. Now, 4 of those were focused on the actual science-gathering data, understanding mouse brain organization, human brain organization, cognitive neuroscience theory.
Right, the foundational knowledge gathering.
But 6 of them, the majority in a way, were dedicated entirely to building those crucial ICT platforms. That's the high-tech hardware, the software, the databases. That's where, a huge chunk of that $1 billion investment actually went.
And that's really where the technological payoff emerged, I think. It's what has outlived the project itself. These 6 ICT platforms, they are the tangible legacy we can point to.
Okay, let's dive into those platforms because this is where it gets really interesting technologically. You can't simulate something if you can't organize the input data, right?
Right.
So what was the first piece they needed?
That would absolutely be the neuroinformatics platform. Its job sounds simple, but it was massive. Gather, organize, standardize, and then make available these vast, often disconnected troves of brain data from labs everywhere.
So like a giant standardized digital library for brain data.
Exactly. It's the foundational catalog, the bedrock for everything else.
Okay, catalog sorted. Then you need to actually build the digital models from that data.
And that's platform number 2, the brain simulation platform. This is where they develop the specific software, the methods, the tools for creating these data-driven digital reconstructions of brain tissue. And of course, the simulation capabilities to run them to see how these digital brain slices function.
But even simulating a tiny slice of brain tissue, that must take enormous computing power, mustn't it? Let alone trying to scale it up. What was driving all this?
Yeah, you're hitting on a key challenge. That's where the high-performance analytics and computing platform, the HP Libre platform, came in. This was the engine room. It provided that exascale supercomputing backbone needed for mapping the brain structure, building really complex models, and then analyzing the mountains of data those simulations produce.
The muscle?
It's the muscle, the raw power needed to run the simulation and crunch the numbers.
Okay, so those 3 platforms sound like the core research and computation loop, but the HBP always had these big medical ambitions too. How did they connect the simulations to, say, understanding diseases in actual patients?
That was the role of the Medical Informatics Platform, or MIP. This platform was crucial. It built the secure, federated infrastructure needed to share anonymized hospital data and medical research data across different institutions, different countries, without compromising privacy.
Federated, meaning the data stays where it is, but researchers can query across it.
Exactly. It allows researchers to look for patterns, understand how diseases cluster, how they progress over time, maybe identify unique biological signatures of diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's within the brain data, all while respecting data privacy rules.
That seems incredibly important for speeding up things like drug discovery or finding better diagnostic tools. Okay, so that's four. The last two platforms really seem to point towards future hardware, don't they?
They do. And one of them, in particular, represents maybe the biggest technological spillover beyond just biology.
Which one's that?
That has to be the neuromorphic computing platform. You could argue this has potentially the biggest direct commercial application down the line. This platform was focused on developing completely new types of computer chips, energy-efficient hardware inspired by the brain's structure and function, not relying on the traditional silicon architectures we use now.
So, trying to build chips that compute more like a network of neurons does. Parallel, maybe more efficient.
Precisely. Mimicking the brain's incredible energy efficiency is a huge goal for computing generally. And this platform pushed that forward. And then finally, you needed a way to check if these complex brain simulations actually behave like, well, a functioning system in an environment.
Right. Does the simulation actually do anything realistic?
Exactly. And that's where the neurorobotics platform came in. It developed virtual robots and even some real physical robots along with virtual environments. These are used as test beds for the brain simulations. Plug the simulated brain into a simulated body and see if it can navigate a room or learn a task. It grounds the simulation in action.
It's just an incredibly ambitious tech roadmap, six major interconnected platforms. But like you said, committing €1 billion, funded roughly half by the European Commission, half by national and private sources, that solves the money problem, perhaps.
Yeah, the funding was secured eventually.
But it doesn't magically solve the scientific problem, does it? And they hit some pretty serious roadblocks fairly early on.
They absolutely did. And one of the primary hurdles was, well, it was technical in a way, but it really stemmed from how neuroscience had been done for decades. It was the incredibly unsystematic nature of the existing data.
Ah, okay. So you're building this amazing high-tech infrastructure, this super highway, but the raw material you have to feed into it, the actual data, is like it's arriving on donkey carts from all different directions using different maps.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. The existing data was all over the place. It varied hugely depending on the species being studied: mouse, rat, monkey, human. It varied based on the biological classification schemes researchers were using. It varied based on the developmental stage of the brain being looked at.
So trying to stitch that together into one coherent model.
It was like trying to assemble a coherent encyclopedia from thousands of pages ripped out of different books, written in different scientific dialects, often contradicting each other. That lack of systematic cohesion made the original grand goal, replicating the brain as a single integrated system model, just incredibly difficult from the outset.
And even if they could magically standardize all that data overnight, there were still fundamental engineering constraints, weren't there?
Oh, yes. Big ones. They were operating right at the absolute edge of what computation could do then and arguably even now. Our source material points out that simply representing individual neurons in the kind of biological detail needed for accurate simulation is, and I quote, very computationally expensive.
Just one neuron.
Just representing one neuron accurately takes a lot of computing power. Scale that up to billions. We're talking fundamental limits related to power consumption. These supercomputers use immense amounts of electricity, memory capacity, data storage. These were huge engineering problems. Whole brain simulation, even a simplified version, still sits right at the bleeding edge of what's technologically feasible.
So you have this immense ambition, these deep technical challenges with data and computation. It feels almost inevitable that this would lead to some friction, some controversy. And it did, didn't it? Around 2014, 2015, things got quite heated publicly.
Yes, they really did. The academic community, or at least a significant part of it, kind of erupted. There was a very public open letter signed by hundreds of European neuroscientists basically complaining that the HBP had adopted an overly narrow approach.
Overly narrow? Meaning what exactly? This sounds like the high-level cognitive scientists, the people studying thought, behavior, consciousness, saying, hang on a minute, you're spending all this money building the pipes and the power stations, but you're not funding the research into what the brain actually does at a complex level.
That's pretty much the core of the criticism. They felt the funding was overwhelmingly focused on the bottom-up approach, the molecular detail, the biological modeling, building the infrastructure platforms, and that this was sidelining the top-down study of higher brain functions, cognition, behavior. Some very influential voices argue that the whole foundational goal, the large-scale simulation of the entire brain, was simply radically premature.
Radically premature. Strong words.
Very strong. They were essentially saying, we don't know enough yet to even attempt this kind of simulation meaningfully.
It sounds almost ironic. The very researchers whose insights you'd ultimately need to feed into a complete brain model were the ones criticizing the project for focusing too much on building the machine to run the model. How did the HBP leadership respond to that criticism?
Well, the HBP leadership didn't just dismiss it out of hand. Their counterargument was essentially the platforms have to come first. They argued that while neuroscience was generating absolutely vast amounts of data, the basic technology for sharing that data, for organizing it, for integrating it across different labs and scales, it just didn't exist in a usable form.
Huh.
The HBP saw itself as providing that critical missing layer, that foundational infrastructure. They insisted that cognitive and behavioral neuroscience would become a major component of the project, but only after the basic platforms were built and stable. You need the tools before you can properly use them for complex questions, was the argument.
But the criticism clearly landed, it had an impact, right? It led to actual structural changes within the HPP.
It absolutely did. There was a major review, and following the public pressure and the review's recommendations, the original quite small 3-member executive committee that had initially led the project was dissolved in 2015. It was replaced by a much larger, broader 22-member governing board.
22 members, that's a big shift.
It was a significant change, yeah. It demonstrated, I think, a clear move towards more distributed governance, trying to be more responsive to the concerns of the wider European neuroscience community. A definite course correction.
Okay, so the project navigated the controversy, adapted its structure, built the platforms, and ran its course, finishing up last year, 2023. The original grand vision, a full simulation of the human brain.
Well, that's still some way off, it seems fair to say.
Yes, that specific goal wasn't achieved in the 10 years.
So after all that effort, all that money, all that technology, what does this massive project actually mean for us now? For you listening, what are the real implications, the concrete legacy? Well, I think the implications are actually huge. And it's largely because the HBP, maybe partly due to the controversy, successfully pivoted its focus. It shifted from chasing that single, perhaps impossible at the time, simulation, towards delivering a collection of robust, genuinely usable tools and infrastructures.
Let's break that down. What about the medical side first? You mentioned the medical informatics platform, the MIP. How does that translate into actual benefits for patients or doctors?
By creating that secure way to share anonymized clinical data across hospitals and research centers, the MIP allows researchers to spot patterns related to diseases much faster and across much larger populations. This can accelerate the investigation of complex disease signatures. What does Alzheimer's actually look like in brain data across thousands of people?
Right.
It can help predict patient outcomes better. And, maybe most importantly, it opens up avenues for developing lower cost, more advanced diagnostic methods, or even testing potential treatments virtually using the simulation platforms, especially for really complex neurological or psychiatric disorders where progress has been slow.
And the computational legacy sounds massive, too. We talked about neuromorphic computing earlier. That kind of brain-inspired hardware, surely that has applications way beyond just neuroscience.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer need for more energy-efficient ways to handle massive computations, which the HPP helped drive forward, is impacting industries way outside biology. This kind of technology is relevant for data mining, making machine learning algorithms run more efficiently, improving telecommunications. The list goes on.
So real technological spillover.
Definitely. The specialized hardware concepts, the software developed to run these incredibly complex simulations, some of that is becoming commercially valuable in its own right. And we shouldn't forget the ethical dimension either. The HPP had a dedicated ethics advisory board and an ethics and society program. They were constantly looking at the societal implications, the ethical challenges, the long-term consequences of developing these incredibly powerful brain research and simulation tools, ensuring the research stayed responsible.
So when you boil it all down, the real lasting artifact isn't the fully simulated brain in a computer.
Not yet, anyway.
But it's the set of tools, the infrastructure that was built in pursuit of that vision.
Exactly. And that brings us neatly to the ultimate successor, the concrete legacy, eBrains, the European Brain Research Infrastructures.
eBrains.
This is now an international non-profit association set up directly as a result of the HBP's work. eBrains is the ongoing entity. It gathers, maintains, and provides access to all those things we talked about, the brain atlases, the simulation tools like the Spinnaker software suite, the curated data, the computing platforms from the global scientific community. The HBP essentially built a permanent, shared, high-tech foundation for future neuroscience.
So recapping then, We've seen the sheer scale of the initial ambition, the incredible technological platforms that were actually built, those 6 core ICT pillars, and also the significant internal struggle, the controversy, that ultimately helped shape its final direction.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating when you look back, I think, is the irony. That highly criticized, radically premature initial goal of creating a comprehensive bottom-up brain simulation.
Right.
It wasn't fully realized in the HBP's lifetime.
Right.
Yet, you could argue that the failure to achieve that incredibly ambitious original vision directly led to the success of building something perhaps more immediately valuable. This lasting, necessary, shared, high-tech research infrastructure. The practical value ended up being in the functional technological foundation eBrains, which is now operational and serving researchers today.
And that foundation is still evolving, still growing. Even though the Human Brain Project officially ended in 2023, eBrains, the infrastructure it created, is now formally a member of the European Open Science Cloud Association. That really cements its role in the future of collaborative European research. Which leaves us, and you listening, with a really interesting question, doesn't it? How will future large-scale international science projects, especially ones tackling incredibly complex data-intensive challenges like understanding the mind, how will they best balance that initial, maybe controversial, grand vision that inspires people and attracts funding with the perhaps more practical, sustained need for building shared, open-source, foundational research platforms like eBrains? It's a tricky balance. We really encourage you to check out the eBrains website, explore the resources available there, and see this operational legacy for yourself.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your stack of sources, articles, and research and deliver the concentrated knowledge you need to be truly well-informed. Our subject today arrived in our solar system at a truly staggering speed, carrying with it, well, a phenomenal amount of mass, and maybe an even greater flood of sensational claims. We are, of course, talking about the interstellar comet 3I Atlas. Our mission today is pretty laser-focused on one key question. How quickly can science actually confirm the natural origin of a galactic visitor? Especially when public attention gets fixated on the possibility of, alien technology. The story starts quietly enough. July 1st, 2025. The ATLAS survey, that's the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, they detected the third confirmed object to enter our solar system from interstellar space.
And right away, the data just stamped this object as being truly unique, scientifically speaking. Its interstellar nature. That was never really in doubt, just because of its sheer velocity and trajectory. When we look at the numbers, 3I Atlas is traveling on what we call an unbound hyperbolic trajectory, which simply means its path is so energetic the sun's gravity has basically zero chance of capturing it. It's definitely leaving our solar system forever.
Unbound, so it's just passing through.
Exactly. And the specifics of that trajectory, that's what really matters here. Its orbital eccentricity was measured at an extreme 6.137. Now, to put that into perspective for you, anything over 1.0 means escape, right? But 6.137, that's practically unheard of. It's just way out there.
Okay, so really, really not bound to the sun.
Not even close. But
No.
the real headline statistic, I think, is its hyperbolic excess velocity. That's the speed it still had after you account for any gravitational boost or drag from the sun. And that number was a phenomenal 58 kilometers per second.
Yeah.
So officially, it's an interstellar comet. That's what the 3I prefix tells us.
58 kilometers per second, that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, breathtaking speed.
Yeah.
So that's what the physics, the math, tells us about the object. But here's the pivot. Despite this overwhelming, clear-cut scientific classification, it's a high-speed comet. Why did certain prominent figures, and we should name names, most notably astrophysicist Avi Loeb, jump almost instantly to speculating this thing might be an extraterrestrial spacecraft?
Yeah, that happened fast. It was a potent mix, really. A history kind of repeating itself from the Oumuamua situation, combined with very limited, very early observational data that, frankly, could be interpreted in different ways at first glance. For a brief window, the initial facts about 3ILS just looked peculiar enough maybe to fit a narrative of it being a manufactured object.
Right. And that is precisely why we're undertaking this deep dive for you today. We're going to first establish the solid scientific consensus on 3ILS. What do we know? Then we're going to step into that world of speculation, unpack the 3 specific controversial anomalies that were cited by the alien spacecraft hypothesis. And finally, we will deliver the decisive astronomical data, the specific molecules detected, the precise size constraints, its ancient history, basically, the evidence that definitively shut down that speculation. Okay, so before we even whisper the words alien architecture, let's nail down its status as a comet. When it's first spotted, magnitude 18, just a faint point of light moving really fast. The initial observations were genuinely ambiguous, weren't they? Was it rock? Was it ice?
Oh, absolutely. That initial ambiguity is super common with distant, faint objects moving quickly, but yeah, it dissolved pretty fast. The crucial difference, of course, is activity. Comets are these icy bodies, right? They sublimate, ice turns straight into gas as they get closer to the sun and heat up. And that creates the fuzzy cloud, the
All
coma.
right, the characteristic fuzzy look.
Exactly. And within just one day, this was July 2nd, 2025, follow-up observations started pouring in. We're talking major observatories. Deep Random Survey in Chile, Lowell Discovery Telescope, the big Canada-France-Hawaii telescope. All of them captured views of a marginal coma, so a little bit fuzzy, and a slight elongation, like a hint of a tail starting to form. That confirmed it was actively outgassing. Case closed. It was a comet.
So if the scientific classification was settled within 24 hours, the debate should have ended right there, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
But the trajectory, the sheer path of this thing was so unusual that it kept the mystery and, yeah, the speculation alive for weeks. Let's circle back to that phenomenal velocity.
That speed, it really does set it apart. We said 58 kilometers for its hyperbolic excess velocity. Just imagine the momentum packed into that. Compare it to the others. The first interstellar visitor, Oumuamua, that was moving at 26 kilometers relative to the sun, far away. The second, 2I Borisov, clocked in at 32 kilometers. 3I Atlas wasn't just faster, it was like leaving them in the galactic dust. It's truly a record breaker among the confirmed interstellar travelers we've spotted so far.
Wow. Okay. But the speed is one thing. Its actual path through our solar system is another. There was a lot of noise around what some called its flat trajectory. Can you explain what that means and why on Earth it was deemed suspicious?
Yeah, that's a great piece of astronomical context to unpack. So most objects in our own solar system, planets, asteroids, they orbit in a fairly flat plane, right? Roughly aligned with Earth's orbit. We call that the ecliptic. Now, if an object is just randomly flung out of some distant star system, you'd probably expect it to come barreling in from pretty much any random angle. High up, low down, whatever.
Makes sense, like throwing darts at a board blindfolded.
Kind of, yeah. But 3I Atlas was traveling very close to this plane. It was moving retrograde, so opposite to the planet's orbital direction, its inclination was about 175 degrees relative to the plane going one way. But that meant its actual tilt relative to the plane itself was only about 5 degrees. It was practically skimming along the planetary plane.
Only 5 degrees off. Okay, I can see why that might gnaw on Rand.
Exactly. For someone looking for statistical anomalies, looking for something that doesn't fit the randomly ejected picture, this alignment was immediately flagged as improbable. The question being raised was, how could a randomly ejected object just happen to arrive so neatly aligned with our system's own orbital architecture? Seems a bit convenient, maybe.
Which I have to admit is a fair question if you're just looking at the statistics in isolation. I mean, if you roll dice trillions of times, every specific result is improbable, but some results just look less random, you know.
That's a good analogy. And that suspicion, that feeling of, that's weird, was heightened by its origin point on the sky. It arrived from the southern celestial hemisphere, specifically from the direction opposite to the solar apex.
Okay, hang on. We need to unpack that for the listener, too. What's the solar apex and why is coming from the south unexpected?
Right. The solar apex is simply the direction our entire solar system is currently moving through the Milky Way galaxy. Think of our sun and all its planets like a big ship plowing through the galactic currents, the local stars. Generally, you might expect the easiest path for incoming interstellar objects, ones just sort of drifting along with the local flow of stars, to be from the direction we're heading towards. From the front of the ship, so to speak.
Like space bugs hitting the windshield.
Sort of. But 3I Atlas came in from the southern, trailing side, almost against that expected general flow. So you had this picture building, a comet that was ridiculously fast, suspiciously flat in its alignment with our planets, and arriving from an unexpected direction in the sky. For anyone predisposed to look for it, all the ingredients for suggesting something highly engineered were absolutely present in those first couple of weeks.
Okay, let's unpack this properly then, get to the core of the controversy. We've established active comet, ridiculously fast, odd direction, flat path. When does this natural wonder officially cross the line into published speculation about alien tech?
That transition happened extremely quickly. Shockingly quick, really. July 16th, 2025. That's less than 3 weeks after discovery, and only about 2 weeks after its cometary nature was even confirmed. A paper appeared on the RC preprint server. That's where researchers post papers before formal peer review. This paper, authored by Avi Loeb and his collaborators, directly speculated that 3I Atlas could be artificial, potentially an extraterrestrial spacecraft. And they based this pretty extraordinary claim on three specific characteristics they labeled as anomalous.
Okay, let's detail these three alleged anomalies, because this is the hypothesis that really grabbed the headlines, right? It's crucial for you, the listener, to understand the arguments made by the proponents of the alien spacecraft idea. What was their first core point?
The first was, as we were just discussing, the anomalous trajectory alignment. Their argument was purely statistical at heart. They just reiterated that the comet's path being so closely aligned with our solar system's ecliptic plane was, in their view, simply too unlikely to happen by chance for a purely random, naturally ejected object. The implication, subtle or not, was that maybe a controlled, non-random origin, perhaps a probe aimed specifically to study the planetary plane, was needed to explain that neat alignment.
Okay, so they focused on the two-straight flight path, essentially. What was the second point of contention? What else looked weird to them?
The second anomaly they cited was its apparently large size. Early estimates of the object's brightness, just how much light it reflected, were very high. Now, when you only have brightness data, especially early on, you tend to overestimate the size of the actual object, assuming some kind of standard surface reflectivity. And these initial rough numbers suggested a diameter anywhere between maybe 10 and 20 kilometers across, which is, pretty big for a comet nucleus.
10 to 20 kilometers.
Yeah.
It's quite large.
It is. And Loeb's team seized on this apparent size. They argued that such a large, solid object, if it wasn't just a diffuse cloud, would be much more plausible as an enormous manufactured construct, rather than a typical small, few-kilometer-sized cometary nucleus. Basically, the brightness was momentarily mistaken for sheer physical bulk.
Okay. And the third alleged anomaly, this one seems like it had a built-in expiration date.
Yeah.
The lack of identifiable chemicals.
Precisely. This was very time-dependent. At the exact moment the paper was written and uploaded, the early telescopic observations, which were, limited in scope and wavelength sensitivity, had not yet detected clear spectroscopic signatures. No definitive fingerprints of common volatile cometary gases like water vapor or cyanide.
So no comet smell yet, basically.
You could put it that way, yeah. And the argument followed logically from that lack of data. If this is truly an icy comet, why is it so silent chemically? Where's the outgassing? And if it's not an icy comet, and it's apparently large, and it's traveling on this peculiar flat trajectory, well, maybe it's a solid, inert, artificially constructed hull that isn't supposed to be sublimating like ice.
So we had this trinity of, let's call it circumstantial evidence. It flew in too flat, it looked too big, and it seemed too chemically quiet. And we absolutely have to remember the context here. This hypothesis was coming from the same lead researcher who had previously, and very publicly, championed the idea of Oumuamua being potential alien technology.
That historical context is vital, yes. This wasn't coming out of the blue. It was part of a consistent intellectual pursuit looking for technosignatures, signs of alien tech. Loeb himself explicitly defended releasing the paper, even while acknowledging that the most likely outcome would be a natural explanation. He framed it as an interesting exercise in its own right and fun to explore, even if it turned out to be wrong.
But I have to ask, from the perspective of the wider scientific community, isn't releasing a hypothesis based on such limited, clearly temporary data, like the lack of chemicals, potentially damaging?
Yeah.
Especially to the public perception of how science works. It sort of puts the burden of proof backwards, doesn't it? Demanding proof of naturalness instead of providing proof of the extraordinary claim.
That was precisely the core of the criticism, absolutely. Many astronomers, people like Chris Lintott, Scott Manley, David Kipping, they were quick to point out that this kind of speculation, based on incomplete early data, really distracts from the actual methodical process of scientific discovery. Science works by patiently gathering evidence, testing hypotheses, and systematically eliminating possibilities using hard data. Jumping to conclusions, especially sensational ones, isn't really how it's supposed to function. And once the big telescopes, the heavy hitters, were fully locked onto 3I, the hard data started flowing in abundance. And that data systematically addressed and, frankly, dismantled each of these alleged anomalies.
Okay, here is where the deep dive truly begins then. We're moving from the speculation to the observable facts. Let's start with refutation 1, the lack of chemicals. This turned out to be the single most powerful blow against the artificial hypothesis, didn't it?
It really did. Although, even before the really definitive data came in, the initial counter-argument was basically common sense astrophysics. As astronomer Darrell Seligman pointed out very early on, the object was still quite far from the sun when that speculative paper was published. It simply takes time and sufficient solar heating for things like water ice, which is less volatile than, say, CO ice, to start actively sublimating enough for us to detect the resulting gas clearly from Earth. The initial chemical silence wasn't necessarily an anomaly. It was more likely just a temporary observational limitation. It hadn't warmed up enough yet.
Right. It was still in the cosmic deep freeze, relatively speaking. But then the space assets came online. The big guns. They provided irrefutable, high-resolution chemical evidence. Tell us what the James Webb Space Telescope and the Sphere-X mission found in August 2025.
Yes. JWST, with its incredible infrared spectroscopy capabilities, it focused its gaze on 3I Atlas, and the results were immediate and completely unambiguous. 3 Atlas was vigorously outgassing, behaving exactly like a very active, excited comet should. They detected the definitive signatures of classic cometary activity. We're talking water ice, water vapor, carbon monoxide, CO gas, even carbonyl sulfide, OCS gas. The chemical silence was well and truly over. It was singing the classic song of a comet, loud and clear in the infrared.
Okay, so it was outgassing.
Yeah.
Vigorously. But the real revelation wasn't just that they found these chemicals, it was the proportions, right? The JWST observations unlocked a major chemical surprise that tells us volumes about where and when this object might have actually formed.
This is where the data gets really fascinating, beyond just confirming it's a comet. JWST revealed that the coma, that fuzzy cloud around it, was unusually rich in carbon dioxide. The measured CO2 to water mixing ratio was exceptionally high. They calculated it at 8 p.m., $1 Cellar. Now, to be clear, that is one of the highest CO2 abundances ever observed in any comet, especially one still relatively far from the sun at that point.
8 times more carbon dioxide than water vapor. That's phenomenal. What does that specific chemical ratio tell us about its life story before it even got here?
It's like finding a cosmic birth certificate, really. This incredibly high CO2 to ratio strongly indicates that 3I Atlas must have formed in the deepest, coldest reaches of its original parent star system. Way out, far beyond what astronomers call the CO2 frost line.
Frost line. That's the distance where it gets cold enough for different gases to freeze into ice, right?
Exactly. In any star system, there's a distance where water freezes the water frost line. Further out, it gets even colder, and that's where carbon dioxide can freeze solid the CO2 frost line. Finding a comet so incredibly rich in CO2 upog ice means it must have formed, and likely spent most of its existence, in an extreme deep freeze environment, much colder and further out than where many of our own solar system's comets formed. This chemical signature is powerful proof of a natural, very ancient formation process. It's giving us a chemical snapshot of a distant, incredibly frigid stellar nursery from long ago.
Wow. Okay. And while JWST was delivering that decisive chemical blow, based on the composition, what were ground-based telescopes like the Very Large Telescope confirming?
They were providing crucial complementary data. Observations from the VLT in Chile confirmed the presence of cyanide gas, CN, which is a really staple chemical found in pretty much all comets. It's a classic indicator. And they even detected atomic nickel vapor, Ni, in the coma. Now, nickel vapor might sound a bit surprising, maybe metallic, but it's actually been seen in many other comets before, including the previous interstellar comet, 2Y Borisov. It's likely released from dust grains. The critical point is water, CO, CO2d2, OCS, CN, even nickel. These are all classical, well-understood, natural signatures of cometary activity. The initial lack of chemicals was definitively proven wrong. It was simply an artifact of waiting for the object to heat up enough for our most powerful infrared tools to pick up the signals.
Okay, so claim number 1, the chemical silence is completely dead. It was loud and clear, chemically speaking. Let's move to refutation 2. The apparent size. The speculation suggested this was a massive 10 to 20 kilometer structure. How did high-resolution imaging correct that pretty fundamental misunderstanding?
Yeah, this was a classic case of misinterpreting reflected light, essentially. The initial high-size estimates, remember, were derived purely from its extreme brightness early on. But that brightness wasn't actually coming from a huge, solid nucleus. It was overwhelmingly coming from the enormous, highly reflective cloud of dust and gas, the coma, that the relatively small nucleus was actively shedding as it heated up. Think of it like a small car driving through a really thick fog bank with its headlights blazing. From a distance, the whole glowing fog bank looks huge, but the car itself is still small. 3I Atlas was the small car, the coma was the fog.
That makes sense. So who got the clear view through the fog?
That crucial data came from the Hubble Space Telescope. Its incredibly sharp vision, its high resolution, was able to effectively separate the light from the tiny nucleus from the surrounding glare of the coma. Hubble's observations put firm upper and lower limits on the actual nucleus diameter. The possible range was constrained to between 0.32 kilometers and 5.6 kilometers. But then, by analyzing the rate of dust loss, how much material it was actively shedding to create that bright coma, scientists could refine that estimate. The most likely diameter for the actual solid body, the nucleus itself, was calculated to be less than 1 kilometer.
Less than 1 kilometer. From potentially 20 kilometers down to under 1. So the potentially massive alien spacecraft turned out to be a pretty standard, small, kilometer-sized space snowball, just one that was particularly dusty and reflective. That's quite a dramatic reversal.
It truly is. And the visual data from Hubble also directly refuted any lingering ideas about controlled propulsion or non-natural activity. The Hubble images clearly showed a distinct sun-facing plume or fan of dust being ejected. This plume was clearly coming from the side of the nucleus facing the sun. That proves the activity was driven entirely by simple natural sublimation. The side facing the sun heats up, the ice is turned to gas, and that outrushing gas pushes dust particles away from the nucleus, creating that fan shape. It's exactly what we see in every normal, active comet. No mysterious engines needed.
And what about its spin? Did the detailed observations tell us anything about the object's rotation? Because you might expect a manufactured object to have a controlled or perhaps strangely smooth rotation, whereas a natural object might be more lumpy and irregular.
Absolutely. And the observations were perfectly consistent with a natural tumbling body. Scientists carefully measured periodic variations in its brightness, which allowed them to determine its rotation period. They found it was spinning with a period of $16 and 16 p.m.01 hours. This kind of regular periodic variation in brightness is exactly what you'd expect from an irregularly shaped, non-spherical body tumbling end over end as it travels through space. It's been shaped and spun by collisions and outgassing forces over potentially billions of years.
Okay. And did we learn anything about its surface properties, like its color?
We did. By analyzing the light reflected from the coma, we could infer the color of the dust particles and likely the nucleus surface itself. It exhibited a distinct reddish hue, and importantly, this reddish color is quite commonly seen in other interstellar objects, like 2I Borisov, and also in a class of asteroids in our own outer solar system called D-type asteroids. This color is typically caused by the presence of complex organic molecules called tholins.
Right, tholins. We should probably pause and define tholins quickly because that sounds technical, but it's quite important here.
It is. Tholins aren't life itself, not biological, but they are complex, sort of sticky, reddish-brown, organic gunk, essentially. They form naturally when intense radiation, like cosmic rays out in deep space, or ultraviolet light from stars bombards simple icy compounds containing carbon and nitrogen, like methane or ammonia ice. Finding evidence for tholins on 3I Atlas is another strong indicator of its natural origin. It suggests its surface material has been exposed to the harsh radiation environment of interstellar space for potentially billions of years, slowly building up this reddish organic layer. Again, this points away from some kind of pristine, recently manufactured surface and strongly towards an ancient, natural, weather-beaten galactic relic.
So putting it all together, the chemicals, the small size, the natural plume, the reddish color, the tumbling rotation, the scientific consensus became pretty overwhelming, didn't it? I think astronomer Samantha Lawler summed it up quite well.
She really did. Lawler made the crucial point, echoing Carl Sagan, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And her assessment of the evidence presented for the artificial hypothesis was that it is absolutely not extraordinary. In fact, it evaporated under scrutiny. Meanwhile, the overwhelming evidence against it, gathered by the world's most powerful telescopes, JWST, Hubble, VLT, provided an unambiguous conclusion. 3I Atlas is a natural, highly active, chemically complex, reddish, sub-kilometer-sized, and extremely fast interstellar comet formed in the deep freeze of some distant ancient star system.
So once we sort of peel away the immediate, maybe superficial gratification of the alien spacecraft narrative, what we're left with is actually a story that is genuinely far more profound. It's the true marvel of what 3I Atlas really represents.
Right.
Let's take a moment to appreciate it for what it truly is, an incredibly ancient galactic wanderer.
It really is a time capsule, and potentially significantly older than our own planet Earth. By carefully analyzing its dynamics, its speed, its trajectory, where it came from, we can start to trace its likely history. Its orbital characteristics are very consistent with it originating from what astronomers call the Milky Way's thick disk population of stars.
Okay, the thick disk. If I remember correctly, that's like the older, sort of puffier halo of stars that surrounds the main flat spiral disk of our galaxy where we live.
That's exactly right. The thick disk stars are generally much older. They formed much earlier in the universe's history compared to the stars in the thin disk, like our sun, which populate the spiral arms. And based on its likely membership in this ancient population, which is the most statistically probable origin given its high velocity, a study published back in July 2025 estimated with pretty high confidence that 3I Italis is somewhere between 7.6 and 14 billion years old.
Wait, hang on. Up to 14 billion years old. The universe itself is only about 13.8 billion years old. So this object might have formed right near the beginning. And it could be 3 times the age of our own 4.6 billion-year-old solar system. That's truly staggering. How confident can we be in linking it to this ancient, thick disk population?
The confidence comes from combining its dynamics with its likely composition. If it is a member of the thick disk, which statistically fits its high speed best, then its parent star would have formed back when the galaxy itself was far less chemically enriched than it is today.
Meaning fewer heavy elements were around back then.
Precisely. Fewer elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. Astronomers call this low metallicity, and observations suggest the composition of 3ILS is consistent with forming around a low metallicity star. The thick disk population is known to be relatively metal poor, maybe containing only about 40% of the heavy elements we find in our own sun, for example. So this chemical fingerprint, combined with the dynamics, strongly suggests an origin in a very different, much older, and chemically simpler part of the galaxy's history.
And that ancient origin also neatly explains the seemingly weird aspects of its trajectory, doesn't it? The phenomenal speed, the strange alignment. It hasn't just been traveling in a straight line from its birthplace. It's been wandering the galaxy for billions of years.
Exactly. That phenomenal speed and that unexpected direction coming in from the southern sky, almost against the general flow near the solar apex, they aren't really anomalous when you consider the timescale. They're simply the natural products of an incredibly long, chaotic journey through the galaxy. It's been gravitationally nudged and jostled by countless stars over literal epochs. Its path has been randomized over billions of years. In fact, studies modeling its path backwards show that even just within the last 10 million years, it has likely passed within about 3.3 light years, that's 1 parsec of at least 25 known nearby stars. Each pass would tweak its trajectory slightly, so its path isn't mysteriously engineered, it's simply ancient and dynamically stirred up exactly what you'd expect for something that has been circulating the Milky Way for potentially 10 billion years or more.
Yeah, it really makes the notion of some, modern alien civilization designing a probe with these specific orbital characteristics seem almost, well, quaint, maybe, compared to the reality of a potentially 14 billion-year-old galactic traveler shaped by cosmic history.
The reality, as is often the case in astronomy, is far more spectacular and awe-inspiring than the fiction. But this does bring up an interesting practical question. We know what it is now. We know how old it might be. Can we actually visit this incredibly old object? Could we send a probe?
I would imagine that 58 kilometer per second speed makes that challenging, to say the least, even with our best current technology.
Challenging is a profound understatement. It was pretty quickly deemed infeasible. Launching a dedicated probe from Earth after its discovery, trying to chase it down, it would have required a massive change in velocity for the probe, what engineers call delta V. The calculations showed it would need at least 24 kilometers per second of delta V capability beyond escaping Earth's gravity. That requirement is simply way beyond our current chemical rocket propulsion technology limits for any reasonably sized mission. It's moving far too fast for us to realistically chase and catch up to it now.
Okay, so no dedicated mission was possible. But we did have existing assets out there, didn't we? Robots already exploring the solar system, ready to maybe take advantage of this incredibly opportunistic flyby. Which missions actually got a look at this ancient visitor as it passed through?
We got lucky with a few, fortunately. As 3I Italis made a relatively close approach to Mars in early October 2025, the European Space Agency's Mars Trace Gas Orbiter, or TGO, which is obviously designed to study Mars's atmosphere. Well, they managed to repurpose it briefly. TGO successfully captured images of the faint comet and its coma, which was remarkable considering the comet was something like 50,000 times fainter than the atmospheric targets TGO is typically designed to view, a real feat of observational planning and engineering focus.
Wow, catching a ghost, basically. What about further out?
Looking further out, the JUICE spacecraft, that's ESA's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, heading towards Jupiter, it's expected to attempt observations of 3I Tellus as the comet passes through the Jupiter system around November 2025. Again, this is pure opportunistic science,
Wow.
asking our existing robotic explorers to quickly turn their electronic heads and snap a picture, maybe get some data on this billion-year-old visitor passing through their neighborhood. It's pretty cool.
Definitely. And what about the highly anticipated missions heading to the outer solar system, like NASA's Europa Clipper and ESA's Hera asteroid mission? Did they get a chance to interact with 3I Tales in any way?
Fascinatingly, yes, potentially in a very direct way. Trajectory calculations predicted that both Europa Clipper, heading to Jupiter's moon Europa, and the Hera mission, which visited the Didymos asteroid system, would likely pass directly through the extended ion tail of 3I Tales in late October and early November 2025.
Through the tail, seriously.
Yeah, the very tenuous ionized gas tail that streams away from the comet, pushed by the solar wind. This is an unparalleled opportunity, really. While we couldn't send a probe to visit the nucleus itself, these spacecraft might have effectively sampled the interstellar material, the actual gas and maybe tiny dust particles being shed by the comet. It's like getting a tiny direct taste of an ancient galactic chemical stew delivered right to our instruments already out there. We'll have to wait and see what, if anything, their sensors picked up.
Okay, so to summarize our deep dive for you today, 3I Atlas arrived in our solar system with a real flurry of speculation. Was it a massive spacecraft? Was it some kind of alien technological relic? But the scientific community, armed with the most powerful observational tools humanity has ever built, JWST, Hubble, the VLT, very quickly and very definitively settled the debate.
Absolutely. The alleged anomalies that fueled the speculation, the flat trajectory, the apparently large size, the initial lack of chemical signatures, they were all systematically explained away. The trajectory, a result of its incredibly ancient orbital dynamics after billions of years wandering the galaxy. The size, an illusion caused by the highly reflective effects of its dusty coma, obscuring a much smaller nucleus. The lack of chemicals, simply a matter of waiting for it to warm up enough for its rich natural cometary gases like cyanide and that record-breaking abundance of 222 to become detectable.
The real story, the scientifically supported story, is that we witnessed the brief passage of an amazing natural relic, comet potentially older than our own solar system itself.
And that journey from the sensational claim to understanding this profound ancient truth was remarkably short in the end. It really highlights the incredible power of modern astronomy to characterize these transient visitors almost in real time now.
It truly is an extraordinary achievement in itself. The fact that we can look up, spot something moving that fast from another star, and within weeks or months confirm its nature, its chemical history, maybe even estimate its multi-billion-year age. That's phenomenal.
It really is. It means we're starting to read the history book of the galaxy, page by page, as these messengers from long-dead star systems pass through.
But as always, we want to leave you with one final, maybe deeply provocative thought, something that builds on the actual science we've discussed. We noted earlier that the detailed chemical analysis showed 3I Atlas is one of the most carbon chain-depleted comets ever observed. That means it was remarkably lacking in molecules made of linked carbon atoms, like dicarbon, T2 tops, and tricarbon, C223, compared to many comets from our own solar system. Now, consider its estimated incredible age, potentially predating the formation of Earth, maybe even predating the Sun itself. What might this unique, ancient, carbon chain-poor chemistry tell us about the specific kinds of building blocks, the raw materials, that were actually available for forming planets, maybe life, in the earliest, most metal-poor epochs of our galaxy's history? Something for you to mull over or perhaps explore on your own.